This is The Roadmap with Lee Heisman.
Hello and welcome to The Roadmap, exclusively here on ASBN.com. I'm Lee Heisman, and every week we bring you some of the brightest entrepreneurs, CEOs, and business owners who are climbing the ladder, scaling their businesses, and thinking about how one day to exit stage left. Well, today I have a very special guest. He has not only climbed the ladder and scaled his businesses, but he's done it twice. So this is really where we learn what we're going to do when we try to exit our business. Welcome today, Aaron Kennedy.
Hey, thanks, Lee. Thanks for having me.
Hello, Aaron. It's been so long. We've had to, like you said, reschedule a ton of times. And that's what happens with a very busy entrepreneur yourself. And today your title is General Manager of Cognition360 at ScalePad.
ScalePad, yeah, that's right.
And we'll get into that, but I want to go back a little bit. You know, I say go back, you're so young. Already, so much younger than myself, of course.
That's easy to do.
But you've been able, exactly. You've been able to grow and exit out of two businesses. Some people are just struggling to try to get out of one. Talk about the first one, AltaCO. You were a partner in that business. Tell us how that happened.
Yeah, so I actually came on just as a regular W-2 employee, but had previously kind of have some entrepreneurial experience. And one of the things that I really wanted to be able to do was not just be the 9 to 5, but kind of roll into that. So what became my partner later at the time, we had some conversations about kind of where we wanted the business to go and what we wanted to do, and mapped out a plan for actually acquiring a bunch of other companies, bolting all those together. We didn't really have an exit strategy at that point. It was more, we just want to build this big thing, this revenue machine. So that was a service-based business, which is a difficult business because it's essentially the more revenue you get, the harder you have to work. And so as a company, and so over time that can get to be exhausting. So you kind of got to reinvent yourself so that you're not the one personally on the hook for, hey, we got to earn some more money this year and that kind of stuff. So I personally have to do, all right, 10 more hours, because at some point those 10 more hours go away.
And that's talking about scaling the business. You know, a lot of businesses grow organically. They hire a sales team. And you're right, you were a service-based business where you were supporting your clientele in a technology format, being their MSP, managed service provider. But a lot of those MSPs and a lot of those businesses out there grow organically. They hire a sales team or their owner sales. But as you scaled, you did it by acquisition.
Yeah, we did a mix of both, but it was the primary strategy was through acquisition. And the reason that is because it's kind of difficult, and I see this a lot in our IT service-based industry, where the owner is the only one that can close the business because he can pull all the levers to kind of make everything happen. And I'm sure that's not unique to our industry. But so what our general goal was, we're going to acquire books of business, and we'll do some organic growth, but that's really just to make up for churn. That was the goal. If we can bring in enough clients to make up for churn that's going out the door, because clients are going to get acquired. It doesn't matter how good of a company you are. People are going to leave your organization, or contracts are going to end. So generally speaking, our plan was acquire, integrate, and we just kept doing that until we reached kind of this mass. And at some point, especially in a market like Atlanta, you get word around town, like people just start coming to you. So at the beginning, it's hitting the streets, that kind of stuff, just getting awareness and that kind of stuff. How do I get more leads? You got to get super creative. But at some point, just through acquisition, we would have more organic sales just from being known in the industry.
So you hit this critical mass, and how important was it in that first business when you were acquiring other businesses? You were going through the exit process, but on the other end.
Yeah.
You were actually buying them, so you were able to go through letters of intent and due diligence and understand under the hood. Was that really helpful when you went out to sell? Because you kind of knew it from the buyer's perspective. How integral was that?
Yeah, I would not say from a tactical perspective it was really helpful. I mean, you kind of know what the process is going to be, but every process is slightly different. But of course, you know the framework. But I could recognize after we did a few, like what would make that be successful in terms of an integration, specifically if the owner was going to stay on for some reason. Because having that mindset of understanding, hey, when you sell this business, it's not your baby anymore. And being okay with that before the sale was probably the best thing that we did.
So I know, before we get into your next role as CEO of Cognition360, talk about that transition for viewers out there that say, hey, I really want to sell my business. After I sell it, Do they exit me out the door? What's it like working for somebody else? What did you run into when you were working for private equity at that point? And again, the gloves are not completely off here, but
Right.
what was the hardest, biggest challenges for you?
Yeah, so it was multiple things. We went from a relatively small organization to a massive corporate organization that's actually on the Japanese stock exchange. So it was like night and day. If you've got private equity or on the stock exchange behind you, their goals are a lot different than your goals. Like as a small business owner, like you might have a bad month this month, but that's not your goal. Your goal is long term. I want to build this business and that kind of stuff. So their long term vision and everything about the company is different. So just kind of transitioning into that, I just kind of ultimately got where that's not really for me. But it
when
gave
you
me
say it wasn't for you, and I have to interrupt because I know your history. I've known you for
Right.
goodness 20 plus years. You used to tell me stories, and this is for viewers out there. You used to tell me stories where you'd be on a Zoom call or a group call, and things would move very, very slow compared to the way that it was when you were running the business.
Yeah, of course, when you're smaller, you're a lot more nimble, and that's what makes you a lot more effective. And there's a lot of consolidation that's actually happening in the MSP space. A lot of companies are getting bought, put together, things like that. And so there's a lot of concern, like there's not going to be the smaller IT shops out there. However, the large IT organizations, they actually can't service the same because they don't understand the customer. They don't understand that very small business type mentality. So being able to translate that into service. So it's actually encouraging because I still see new companies forming all the time with young guys, and I've been coaching some of them, and that's been great.
Well, so now transition. You leave that process, that first exit, the private equity firm. You leave on good terms, which is wonderful. You then become CEO of Cognition360, a software company.
Yeah. So that was you leave one organization and it's like, what am I going to do now? So you're not in a state where I got to find a job as soon as possible. But what am I going to do? I think everybody that I've talked to is in the same shoes, just falls into consulting in some way. But I knew that wasn't long-term what I wanted to do. That's a, eat what you kill kind of mentality. And that was not really what I was looking for. I want to build something again. So I love building. And I found this other software company. So I moved from actually I moved to the vendor side of what I was servicing before. So I would have been my own customer before, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
And but I wanted to do something in the same field. I didn't want to lose my network and all that kind of in terms of people. And I wanted to be able to still be in that same industry, still go to the same events, and keep that value that I had because I carried that with me. However, I couldn't do the same business because of non-competes, and honestly, I didn't really even want to do it. I'd been doing it for so long. So what I wanted to get into is the vendor side, which is now software, which is a completely different business than a service-based business, and I learned a lot on that side. It was really, really great.
So from the time you took on the CEO role till the time that business, again, recently exited, was that a couple years? How many years was that?
So, it wasn't long. It was probably a year.
So 1 year from the time you took that role until the time that you exited. So what did you learn? You had that first transaction, the first exit with Alta CEO. You learned from that seller side what the landmines were. You then take it into this one, and although it's a different industry in terms of being from the vendor, were there things that you learned from the first time? Any mistakes from that exit process that you applied here that you could share with our viewers?
Yeah, again, it was just mentality around approaching the sale and more like specifically as the integration is happening post-sale. So you're engaging with a bunch of people, whereas I used to do a million different things. Now there's one person who does one part of my job, and they're going to do it completely different than I did it. And if I get upset, they're not going to do it the right way or the fast way that I'm accustomed to operating, because I can not only control the HR side, but I control the operations side. Well, they've only got one piece of one lever over here. So that understanding how that kind of stuff works and being okay with it is the biggest thing that I think has made me be a little bit more successful on this side. And so in terms of learning things like it's all about your mindset and your approach. And you and I've talked about this before with movies and things like that. Going into a movie with bad expectations or with really high expectations makes it probably a bad movie when you walk out.
And that's
right?
life in general,
Yep.
right? Life in general. I find this really funny because you've been the tech guy for 20 plus years in my world, always the young tech guy.
Right.
And one of the funny stories I'd love for you to share is when you sold here to Slack, and that's a bigger tech company than you even were, and you're working with these people half your age. So when you're the old person, I find that funny. And you're working with them half your age, and they don't use email. Email is antiquated in the world of high-level tech now. Could you talk about that? Because it's something that blew me away.
Yeah, so like you say, I've always been the youngest guy in the room, so I'm just kind of used to the, oh, look at the baby in the room and stuff and whatever, and so I've been fighting that fight for years. Don't do that anymore.
Well, you don't, because you have the beard.
Yeah, that's specifically why I have it. But so it's hey, I'm emailing and I'm not getting responses. So I'm very much you need to be on your responses. I was an inbox zero guy for years. And why are you not responding to oh, you didn't Slack me a message. What are you talking about? And I'm like, oh, you mean chat, like text? Like you want me to send you a TikTok now on what to do? So it got to be where it was just like, what are we even talking about? But that's all that they use. And not even so much like that's the culture, like that's specifically in some company policies. Like for internal communication, we do not use email. And so over time, I'm like starting to kind of understand that and try to figure that kind of stuff out. The same policies or framework of your own brain still work out there. So I send you a Slack message. I need to have a way to follow up on that. And so I got to learn different buttons and things like that to use. I'm coming around to it. I've been in there for about 7 or 8 months now. But I still,
I just love that you're getting pushed around by the youngins in the firm and teaching you technology, which is really quite funny to me.
Yeah, it's humbling.
Go back a little bit, because you talk about the first exit, it was your first time. You talk about the second one where you put your ducks in a row, and viewers out there might not understand that, when you do a transaction, 51% is the financial piece, 49% is usually the structure. What happens post-transaction, how your contracts work, do you have a second or a third bite of the apple? And in your case, Aaron, when you sold this second business that you had and you were a part of that, you've been a jet setter over the past 8 months. I've never seen you travel as much, and you're on a plane literally every week. You're out of the house months at a time, which you've never done before. Did you know this was going to happen? Were you prepared for it? Were there any surprises that came about after this transaction, or were you prepared across the board?
Yeah, so that was a bit different because I wasn't really ready, I think, you hear like, hey, so basically what I wanted to do was be out in front and be the voice of Cognition360, or the face of it in this instance. So that means you're now going to every single show that's out there, meeting, shaking hands, all that kind of stuff. Obviously, that can take a toll on you when you're out 2-3 weeks out of a month. Specifically when you're, I was in Prague, London, things like that. Never had that exposure before in our space. So it's good from a kind of learning what that's like. And again, it's another one of those, the same reason I wanted to get in the software space, where it was, this seems kind of interesting and get some exposure into that. Maybe that's not for me. So with this, I'll still continue to travel, and I love meeting people, but the actual act of traveling, being away from the family for so long can be quite a bit. But so I don't know if I'm not a road warrior, I'll put it that way. But it was really just an added bonus. I didn't really know in terms of, I get to see some new cities and meet some people that I never would have met before. I've had customers for years that I've never put a face to, and now I was able to do that.
Well, a face in person. Probably Zoom has helped, but you have an idea. But
I don't know if it was an AI face or who knows what.
We were just talking about that earlier. You're exactly right. So, with all of this going on, and now you're a part of the larger organization, what are the next? I know you're going to run out whatever length of time, but you always have a plan. What are the next few chapters after this?
Yeah, so I always love building stuff. So fortunately, the company I'm at now, ScalePad, they've positioned it so I'm still have control over what I can do for my product, and then for the larger organization. So they've given me space. They're all entrepreneurs themselves, and so they've come up from the same areas that I've been. So they've kind of handed me my own little sandbox. So as long as I can stay content in there, I'm pretty happy on that. I always like kind of doing stuff on the side and stuff and whatever, and exploring, is this for me? Is it not for me? Is this viable? Is there revenue? Is there a demand for this kind of stuff or not?
So go back to that. And before we wrap up here, when you were negotiating the second deal with them, was that part of the agreement that I am going to be in my own sandbox? I want to, and this is for viewers out there considering this, how much do you focus on the post-transaction structure when you're under LOI, when you're going through the PSA, the purchase and sale agreement? How important was that, and how much detail did you put into
and I think it's much easier to have that conversation on the front end, obviously build that in legally. I think a lot of people, especially entrepreneurs, when they get post-sale, And they've been able to do literally whatever they want. I can bill your grandmother to help her, wash her windows. It doesn't matter. You could do anything. Whereas now it's like, well, this is what you're here to do. You have a new boss. So it feels like they've got a wet blanket on them where they're restricted in what they want to do. And instead of having outlets for that pre-built in, they're just explode and they quit. So they can't handle the I'm not in charge, but and more specifically, I can't do what I want to do. So for people that's in their wiring, having that built out ahead of time, which is what I did. It was, hey, here's specifically what I want to be able to do, and post transaction and be able to take care of that kind of stuff, and that stuff's been great.
That's important. Well, your experience shines through because you learned from the first one. You probably built in, like you just said, all of the little nuggets and levers to give you the freedom and flexibility you are now.
Right.
I'm so glad I have a front row seat to get and watch what you do. If people want to just get in touch with you, just for even guidance or advice, or if they had an MSP out there and they want to use the software, what's the best way?
LinkedIn for sure. That's definitely the easiest way to get in touch with me. I'm pretty active on there, so it's just Aaron Kennedy on LinkedIn, and you can find this exact face right on there.
Oh yeah, you got that AI face. Is that your LinkedIn?
No, that's my Facebook face.
That's your Facebook page. Excellent. You were the first one to show me that many months ago. Well, Aaron, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, it's great to have.
Absolutely, guys. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today. I hope the show was insightful for you as it was for me. I know I always learn a lot when I'm with Aaron. We hope to see you again next week on another episode of The Roadmap.
Thanks for watching The Roadmap with Lee Heisman.